What's up everybody? Today we're going to be setting up my brand new Hoyt Carbon RX-7. I am super excited to get this thing set up and rolling and are ready for some hunts this fall. Let's get into it. Now the steps I'm going to go through in this video are very basic and very fast. But if you want a more comprehensive and advanced bow build tutorial, check out the links in the description below. First things first, Josh is going to help me check the timing.
Axle to axle is right on at 30 inches, so should be within a 1/4 inch of that, and it's right on. So timing is set. Time to set the knocking points. Just slip it in the press. Grab our bow square. Now we're going to set this up so that the center of the arrow goes right through the center of the burger button. The burger button is this hole right here in the back of the riser that the rest attaches to. We're going to tie knock sets on the top, and then we're going to use the arrow to tie the knock sets on the bottom, and then we're going to go ahead and tie the D-loop on. About a 1/4 inch so that it's easier to burn down. Grab one of your arrows and we'll set the bottom knock set position. For our bottom knock set position, it's important that we leave some kind of a gap because we don't want any knock pinch at full draw. We don't want too big of a gap because we don't want that knock to have a lot of play at full draw either. We're going to leave it at roughly just over a 1/16 of an inch. Time for the D-loop. We're using BCY number 23. I'm just going to cut off a piece roughly 6-7 inches. We're going to cut off the excess, but good enough to get started. Any BCY 24, totally fine too. I just prefer the number 23. D-loop's done. Now we're going to check the sync. While checking cam sync, we're trying to make sure that these two identical cams rotate in the exact same position once they get to full draw. As you can see, the top stop has a slight gap in it and the bottom stop's hitting. So we're going to go ahead and adjust the cables, just taking a 1/2 twist out of that top cable to make the adjustment. Our top cam is slow, so we're just going to take a 1/2 twist. Actually, we're going to take a full twist out of this top cable. Now that the cams are in sync, it's time to install the arrow rest.
The rest I chose for this year is the Hoyt QAD Integrate rest. I ran this last year, really liked it, didn't have any problems whatsoever, so chose to run it again this year. I've been shooting a drop away rest for pretty much my whole life, probably 10-12 years, and I really like how they work for me. There's a lot of other type of rests out there that can work well if they're set up properly, but I just choose the drop away.
Looks perfect. We just installed the Integrate rest, and this is a great rest because it's basically designed and built so that when you attach it right in line with that alignment mark, essentially, the left and right and the vertical adjustment is set pretty much perfect, so you don't have to adjust it as long as you put the knocking point in the right position. So once we go to tuning with this, paper tuning and even bare shaft tuning, we should be very, very, very close right here from the start without even having to make any adjustments whatsoever. Just gonna put it in this downward cable right here. right at the bottom of the grip. Thankfully they serve right up to this. We don't have to tie any knot here. We can just pull this cable through, and I'm just going to tie a knot on the end. Okay, and that's what's going to be pulled up against that serving right there. And then we're going to loosen that to set the cord and the rest. Basically just adjusting that tensioner screw right there so that this rest cord can still slip through, but it still pulls it up to that 90 degrees when we draw it back. So now that that's set in the right position, we're just going to draw it back. This cord's going to pull through to the correct position, then our rest is pretty much going to be set. Okay, rest cord pulled through. Now we're just going to tighten this. We'll just leave that extra for the tuning portion right now. The rest is set. This launcher comes up within that last inch of the draw, so everything's pretty much foolproof from this point on. You might have to make a couple adjustments after the fact for tuning, but now it's on to adding the sight.
So this year I'm going with the same sight I've been shooting for I think 3 years now, the Black Gold Ascent Verdict 5-pin, and it's a movable sight, so I can just dial this down and shoot out to about 100, 110 yards for practice purposes is how much I got out of my last bow. So probably pretty similar with this RX-7. I really like this sight because it's very tough. I've stalked a lot of animals while using this sight, and I've never had it break or move or anything like that. So that's very important for a sight for me, is being bulletproof and super tough. And I also like the fact that it can slide down pretty much as far as I can get it without hitting that arrow, so I can get a lot of distance out of this. Even with the 5-pin, I have a 20 to 60 on the pins, and then I can just use that bottom pin as my slider. Now that we've got the sight on the bow, we're going to set our first, second, and third axis. First and second are going to be set in the bow vise, which is super handy, and then third axis will be set at full draw.
Your second axis is off just very slightly.
Now I've got my first and second axis set, and we're going to move on to the third axis. So for our third axis adjustment here, we're going to do this at full draw because the bow naturally moves a little bit left and right, torques a little bit left and right when at full draw. So I'm just going to draw back, aim against this string, and then go down to a 45-degree angle and chuck my bubble. All right, it's just a hair to the right, so we're going to make some adjustments and go from there. Now when I line up all my pins on a vertical string and my bubble is centered, the third axis is set, and we're going to put in the Peep Sight. Over the years, I've been shooting a 1/4-inch Peep Sight that's a little bit bigger than a lot of guys like to run, but I use it because I have a bigger sight housing. I have the biggest one that Black Gold makes, and it just seems to let in a little bit more light, but also in hunting situations, I really like to see more of the animal instead of like a more cropped in view of like the animal's vitals or something like that. If they're at 20 or 30 yards, I like to see more of the animal so I can see maybe other animals coming around, and it just helps me out to get me to focus on that shot a lot more, and I can see what's going on in a hunting situation. So that's what I'm going to run with, a 1/4-inch, and let's throw it in. Going to draw back here and see where it lines up. just a little bit high. When I do this, I like to close my eyes and get my anchor point exactly where I like it, and then I'll open my eyes and see where the peep's at. All right, that looks good. Let's tie one serving around it just to keep it in place for now.
Okay, BCY power grip, 0.018 inch diameter. Just gonna wrap around the peep for right now. I'm not gonna do a permanent tie-in because we're gonna make a few tuning adjustments that might affect where that peep sight sits best for Micah.
Now that we've got our peep sight in, we're gonna move on to paper tuning, but before we do that, I wanna talk a little bit about the arrows I'm gonna be running this year. I switched things up a little bit. I'm shooting the Easton Axis 5mm. First time I'm shooting the Axis, I've heard a ton of good things about them, so I'm really excited. This is a 340 spine Axis. I'm shooting about 73, 74 pounds, and I'm actually set at 29-inch draw length this year. I usually shoot 28.5, but I really like how this bow feels at 29 right now, so I'm gonna keep it at that. And the 340 Axis was kind of the spine that I was gonna need for that setup, so that's what I'm running. These arrows here are gonna weigh in right about 456 grains, heaviest setup I've ever shot. I'm looking forward to testing these heavier arrows because I have had issues with penetration in the past. Last year I was shooting about 432 grains, which is still pretty decent, but even before that I was shooting upper 300s, which is just not quite heavy enough for penetration. And I had one instance where I hit a deer in the shoulder and the arrow did not penetrate very far at all. So I'm really looking forward to using this arrow just a little bit heavier and hopefully get a little more penetration with it. And I switched a couple other things up this year. I was shooting a insert-outsert last year and I was having problems with it bending. Even in like hard foam targets, it would bend a little bit and cause the arrow to fly a little bit wacky. So I went to the 50 grain brass hit inserts from Easton this year, and so far I really liked them. And then shooting the AE Max Stealth Veins again, I really like the orange color combination because it just stands out really well. So that's what I'm running this year. Really excited to see how it performs. If you have any suggestions of arrows that have worked really well over the years for you, comment them down below and I'd love to learn about your setup. Let's move on to paper tuning. Just gonna shoot one through paper here and see where we're at. Knock high, way high on that. On that first tear, it was a little bit knock high, so I checked my fletching, made sure I didn't have any fletching contact, and I actually did. So I twisted my arrow in the knock a little bit and got rid of the fletching contact, but we still have a knock right tear, so I'm gonna move my rest to the left just a little bit. Well, I just shot it through paper again. We've got a clean tear, so my initial paper tuning is done. Now I'm gonna toss on some stabilizers and head into bare shaft tuning. So this year I'm gonna be running a 10-inch front bar and a 10-inch back bar. I've been using 8 ounces on the front of my front bar recently, and I've really liked that, so I'm gonna try that again this year. I'm gonna do more experimenting down the road and see if I like a little bit more weight in the back or the front, but to start, I'm gonna go with the 8 ounces out front. So here's my setup, at least to start for this year. I've got my back bar just slightly angled away from the string. That's how I like it. Usually I'm just gonna start right there and see how it feels. And I've got it just slightly downhill from horizontal. Again, I'm just gonna start there. I'm gonna play with it around a little bit, shoot further distances, see what works best for me, but that's gonna be my starting point. The purpose of bare shaft tuning is so that our bare shafts hit with our fletched arrows. This is important because it helps our broadhead flight and it helps our broadheads group evenly with our field points. It also helps the bow be more forgiving and it helps with a more accurate shot. On my first bare shaft shot, I was hitting a little bit to the right, so I made some adjustments to my rest, shot again, and the second shot was much closer to my fletched arrow. My bare shafts are now hitting with my fletched arrows, so this concludes my initial bow tuning setup. Now the last piece I'm going to add to my bow is the quiver. I don't have it yet, but it's very similar to this one I used last year. I'm going to use the Hoyt double gripper 6-arrow quiver this year, also in the buckskin color. Here's my final bow setup on the brand new Hoyt Carbon RX-7. Like I said, I'm shooting 29 inches this year, set at 72 pounds. Got my black gold Ascent verdict sight like I talked about earlier, stabilizers on here, Hoyt QAD integrate rest, and then the quiver that I talked about. I'm really excited to get this bow rolling and get on some spring turkey hunts this spring. I'm gonna be hunting Iowa for the first time in my life, and I'm really excited about that. Gonna be an awesome fall, hopefully. This bow is shooting incredibly well. I shot the RX-5 last year and I really love that bow, but so far this one's even smoother and I think even faster than that bow. So I'm really excited to get this thing out in the woods, get it testing outside at some further distances, and have a really awesome year with this brand new bow. If you have any questions about my bow setup or anything else about the new RX-7, comment them down below. And again, if you want to learn more about comprehensive and advanced bow tuning and setup, check out the links in the description below where we have advanced bow build tutorials. Thank you so much for watching.